Alright, in this video we will learn what quadratic equations are. Quadratic equations are polynomial equations, any equation which has variable raised to the power 2, like any variable x, y, z, a, b, c, any variable raised to the power 2 which is being multiplied. X multiplied by x is x squared, which has this squared term, any variable, any alphabet raised to the power 2. Only 2, nothing, no other number. We need to have a 2 to be able to call as a quadratic equation. A quadratic equation is in this form, ax squared plus bx plus c, where a should not be equal to 0, because if a is equal to 0, this x squared term will become 0 and we won't have this x squared thing, so it won't be called a quadratic equation. We can have b as any number, any integer, minus anything, 0, 5, 10, anything, and c is a constant. It's a pure number. It is not being multiplied with x, any number alone, 5, 6, 7. Like, for example, this is a quadratic equation, x squared minus 5x plus 6. This is a quadratic equation. Unlike linear equation, this part of this equation is a linear part, as we did in the previous videos. We learned about the linear equations. If we remove this part, this becomes a linear equation. In linear equation, we do not have any squared power on this x. X is alone. But here with x squared, when we have this squared, it's a quadratic equation. Okay, so how do we solve these quadratic equations? We have 3 ways to solve them. Let me erase all this. We have 3 ways to solve this. Factoring method. Other is the quadratic formula. And the third is the completing the square method. Completing the square method. This method is rarely used and only used in some cases because it's a bit difficult. We will cover these in 2 separate videos, the second and third, and now we will do the factoring method. How to solve the quadratic equations using the factorization method. Alright, let's start. In the factorization method, what we do is, okay, let's have a question. We have x squared minus 5x plus 6. I use the same example I just wrote a few minutes ago. Okay, when we solve using this factorization method, we just write in this way, x, and leave a lot of space, and then multiply it with some other bracket, and write again x, and leave some space. Okay, so we need some number, 2 numbers which multiply to give positive 6 and add to give minus 5. How do we know that we have to get this 6? Like, how do we know that we have to get some number when we multiply and get a 6? Why 6? 6 is actually this 6 times this x squared. This is being 6x squared. When we multiply these numbers, we have to get this. And when we add those 2 numbers, we get minus 5x. Okay, so what are these 2 things? These 2 numbers, as we know, like when we try, the best way is to take the LCM of this multiple number. When we multiply these a and c, this a and c, we get the number. In this case, we get 6 multiplied by 1, we get 6. So when we take the LCM of 6, we get 2 times 3 and 3 times 1. There are only two numbers 2 and 3 which multiply to give 6. So when we multiply 2 and 3 we get 6. And how do we get minus 5? We can get it when we add minus 2 and minus 3. And wait, you can see that when we multiply minus 2 with minus 3 we get a positive 6. And here we have a positive 6. So these two numbers will work. Taking out the LCM will only give you the positive, and you need to figure out the negatives as well, because when we multiply a positive term with negative we get a negative, and when we multiply two like terms like both positive or both negative we get a positive term. So we have to look for that. Okay, so for now we have our two numbers minus 2 and minus 3. So here we give them this, let's give it minus 2 over here and minus 3 over here. Okay, so when we have these numbers, when we multiply it, let's see what we get. X times x minus 3 and minus 2 times x minus 3. Let's see if we get this. It's x squared minus x minus 3x. This is minus 2x. This is positive 6. You see now what we do is we get these two numbers minus 3x and minus 2x, which I mentioned earlier, that when we add these two numbers we had minus 2 and minus 3. We have to put x with them. We need to have two numbers which when we add give us this thing, and when we multiply give us this. How does this come? You can see that I multiplied these two numbers minus 2 with minus 3 to get this 6. Here we have this 6, and what we are doing is we are adding these two numbers, this and this. We are adding these two numbers to get this minus 5x. Okay, so what's the answer of this equation? What's the answer when we solve it with the factorization method? The answer is we need to solve these two brackets separately. We keep it equal to 0. It's not even a question when it's not equal to 0. I did this mistake. So a quadratic equation can only be solved if it is equal to 0. It won't make any sense. It won't be an equation even if it does not have this equal to sign. So coming back to the answer, we have to solve this. I'll just rub it to have some space. We have this x minus 2 and x minus 3. So we keep it equal to 0 separately. X minus 2 equal to 0 and x minus 3 equal to 0. Here we get x equals to 2. We add 2 on both sides. When we add 2 over here it becomes 0. Minus 2 plus 2 is 0, and we get positive 2 over here. So likewise we get positive 3 over here. These two answers are roots of polynomial equations. I have a separate video for what roots are because it's a lengthy topic. So I'll cover that in detail. You can find its link in the description below. Okay, so that's how we solve quadratic equation using the factorization method. I'll do another example to teach you a bit better, have some different answers. Okay, let's take x squared minus x and minus 30. Okay, so how do I factor these out? So we have this number. We have the first thing is that you have to get this cleared. Like if we had an equation in the form 2x squared minus 2x minus 60, you have to get this x alone to apply the factorization method. You can apply the factorization method even now, but it's better if you get this x squared alone. It makes things easier and solves your question very quickly. So how to get rid of this 2? We just divide whole equation with 2. Divide this by 2. Divide all by 2. You divide it whole by 2, we get equal to 0, and 0 divided by 2 is also 0. So when we divide it by 2 and when we take 2 common in this equation, we get x squared minus x and minus 30 divided by 2 equals to 0, and 2 times 2 is 1, and we get x squared minus x minus 30 equal to 0. Okay, so we have to bring it in this form to be able to solve, make it able to be solved. Okay, so let's solve this. X squared minus, okay, let's do it. X squared minus x minus 30 equal to 0. Okay, so what we did in the previous example, it was we took the LCM of this. We found the least common multiples of this number, 30. Okay, so we take 2 and then we got 15. 2 times 15 is 30. Then the smallest prime number we can divide 15 by is 3. 3 times 5 is 15, and then 5 times 1 is 5. We do it until we get 1. Okay, if you don't know how did I take this LCM, there's a separate video on that, taking the LCM, what's the least common multiple. You can check its link in the description below. Okay, we get 3 numbers. Now we have to experiment with them. We have 2, 3, and 5. So we need to get a number which when we multiply, we get this minus 30, and which when we add, is 30 times x squared. Or you don't need to write this x squared, you just deal with the numbers, that's easier. And when we add, we get minus 1. That's minus 1. Okay, so how do we get 30? When we multiply any of these two numbers, I don't think we get a 30 in any way. 5 times 3 is 15, and 2 times 3 is 6, and 2 times 5 is 10. So there is one more trick. You can make numbers by multiplying these two. Like you can make this one number and multiply it with the other one, or make this the number and multiply with the third one. Here we can take is, let's try, how do we make it 30? Let's take this 2 and 3, 2 multiplied by 3, make this a number and take 5 as the other number. Okay, so 2 times 3 is 6, and this is 5. 6 times 5 is 30. Okay, here we got a 30, but we need a negative 30. So one of them should have to be negative so that we can get a minus 30, because if both are positive, we get a positive 30. If both are negative, we get a positive 30 again. We need to have one positive and one negative for that. Okay, so how do we do it? We need to look into this addition part. We at least found our numbers to get 30, so we need a minus 1. How do we get a minus 1 out of 6 and 5? The obvious way is to subtract 6 from 5. If 5 minus 6, we get minus 1. So here we know which one is our negative number. Here we have minus 6 and positive 5. Now our mystery is solved. How do we get this minus 30? We got this minus 30 by multiplying minus 6 with positive 5. We get minus 30. Okay, so here we have our two numbers, minus 6 and 5. Now let's make that equation. That looked like a lengthy method, but when you practice a lot, you get used to it, and then you solve it real quick in your mind. Okay, so let's do it. We make two brackets, and then what do we have? Minus 6 and plus 5. We have minus 6 and plus 5. Okay, so what we do is we keep them equal to 0. X minus 6 equal to 0, and x plus 5 equal to 0. We get x equals to minus 5 and x equals to 6. These are our two answers of this quadratic equation. I hope now you get how to solve the quadratic equation using the factorization method. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.